Feeling trapped by outdated cancer treatments? You're not alone. Welcome to Off-ScriptRX, where we break free from the limits of conventional medicine and open the door to revolutionary repurposed medications. I'm Dr. Nathan Goodyear, and this podcast is about disrupting the cancer care status quo. It's time to reclaim your health with treatments they don't want you to know about. If you're ready for a future of real possibilities, you're in the right place. Rethink repurposed medications. Rethink reality.
Welcome to the Off-Scripts podcast. Number one, getting back in the podcast chair, super excited. So I thought, what better repurposed drug to talk about? Because that's really what Off-ScriptRX is about. It's about empowering you, the individual, and maybe you, the practitioner, to use repurposed medications as the evidence dictates to help your patients, or as a patient to help you achieve the wellness and the treatment outcome you're looking for. I thought, what better way to start than with ivermectin? You know, ivermectin is a really interesting drug from a repurposed medications perspective, because when you look at the concept of ivermectin as a repurposed drug, it's gone through a lifespan of a wonder drug to a wonder dog to a wonder dud to a possible wonder drug as it relates to cancer. So I thought, let's go through that first, and then let's highlight some of the mechanisms of ivermectin and the research supporting it. And you'll find this in the notes, so definitely check that out in the accompanying podcast. So when we look at the wonder drug aspect of this, I want you to understand it's not my words. What we're going to do here is I'm going to highlight the words in the published literature about ivermectin. So here's a nice quote from 2011 from an article. And the quote says, "There are few drugs that can seriously lay claim to the title of wonder drug." Quote unquote. Penicillin and aspirin would definitely be one, but they're referencing here ivermectin. And in another 2017 publication, ivermectin was referred to as a revelation. Now, obviously, that's a revelation because it's being considered as a wonder drug. 1998, another quote talking about ivermectin as a wonder drug. Ivermectin proved to be more of a wonder drug in human health, improving the nutrition, general health, and well-being of billions of people worldwide ever since its first use in humans in 1988. See, it received FDA approval in 1987. Now, there are those late-night comedian hosts that forgot that they were not researchers or scientists or doctors and declared ivermectin a veterinarian medicine. So for a wonder dog. But, you know, they needed to stick with their first career because they weren't doing that well either. But here we have in 1987, the actual FDA approval. But here in 1988, they're actually talking about it already as a wonder drug, treating billions of people. 2017 called it another wonder drug, and it continues to surprise and exceed expectations. Another quote, "It quickly became a remarkable success. Continues to surprise and excite scientists, offering more and more promise to improve global health by treating a diverse range of diseases with unexpected potential." Get this, antibacterial, antiviral, and anti-cancer agents, particularly showing its quite extraordinary activity. Not my words, 2017 article, Journal of Antibiotics. Seems to kind of destroy the narrative, doesn't it? Makes you wonder, those that would propose ivermectin as not a wonder drug as maybe propagandists? And who's the useful idiots? It's interesting when we then go into the wonder drug, the wonder dog aspect of it, following the wonder drug. You know, that began in the veterinarian world. That's where ivermectin got its origin from. In the early 1970s, There was the public-private sector partnership with Amura, the head of the antibiotic research group at Tokyo's Hitasato Institute. He formed a collaboration with U.S.-based Merck, Sharp, and Dohme Pharmaceutical Company, and this was under the direction of Dr. William Campbell. And they had isolated the organisms from soil samples. And they were called ivermectins. Now, this is not ivermectin, but ivermectins. It's really interesting when you look at a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, she's talked about this repeatedly, Dr. Kathleen Rudy, R-U-D-D-Y, so check her out. She actually calls this a bioweapon because when you look at this ivermectin substance chemical, it's actually a bioweapon from a single-celled organism in the soil. It is a weapon to destroy its enemies. Since this single-cell organism doesn't have an immune system, it creates this ivermectin, a bioweapon, to protect itself against enemies. So let's look at bacteria. Let's look at viruses as it relates to the human condition. Bacteria and viruses would be the same way. Now, we don't make ivermectins, but we could take ivermectin. And what about cancer? Well, cancer is an enemy, but it's a different one. It's not a foreign enemy. It's a domestic enemy from within. And we don't, again, make ivermectin, but maybe we might take ivermectin and use the same bioweapon. Now, they collaborated together, and this was first discovered, the ivermectins, in 1975. And the first publications on ivermectin appeared in the literature in 1979. Again, this originated from Japanese soil. And it was initially introduced into veterinary and animal health in 1981. So you can see it was the 1970s research discovery and then bringing it into animal health in 1981. So let me describe to you the mechanism of action per some of the original paper. Ivermectin activates glutamate-gated chloride channels in the parasite, causing a large amount of chloride ion influx and neuronal hyperpolarization, thereby leading to the release of gamma-aminobutyric acid to destroy the nerves and the nerve transmission of muscle cells, inducing the paralysis of somatic muscles to kill parasites. So one of the main described mechanisms here of ivermectin in killing parasites is it basically creates a paralysis of muscles. So not just that it can't move, but that muscles can't perform normal functions such as digestion and talking about the heart and all these kind of different things that would be associated with an organism's livelihood, here being a parasite, the mechanisms of blood flow, the mechanisms of digestion and elimination of waste, all of these things would be compromised. Now, that's in animal use for parasite treatment. So leave it to the late night host to at least get one part right, in that it does have use and its origin did begin in the veterinarian world. But that's where they don't tell you the rest of the story. Again, I think they were the useful idiots to propagate the propaganda, the approved narrative. But in human use, it came to being in 1987. And wait till you hear these numbers. We're talking just not million, but we're talking hundreds of millions of people. So approved in 1987. So when people say, well, medical boards don't approve, or Medicare doesn't approve, or Medicaid doesn't approve, yes, they do. The FDA did approve. So 112.7 million people have been treated yearly, predominantly in Africa. And looking at ivermectin for lymphatic filariasis, with approximately 176.5 million treated since 2015. So we're looking at an estimated 1.2 billion treatments authorized for ivermectin, and again, for parasites. For most of this century, some 250 million people have been taking it annually to combat two of the world's most devastating, disfiguring, debilitating, and stigma-inducing diseases. It's a quote from an article. So we're talking about hundreds of millions to billions of people taking ivermectin. So it's not just for animals, and it's just a few people. So this discovery actually more than just treating animals and more than just treating people, actually has been shown to win awards. In 2015, the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine was awarded to the group that discovered ivermectin. So it won a Nobel Prize in Medicine. By the way, interesting note, in 2015, artesunate, another antiparasitic that is much maligned, also won a Nobel Prize in Medicine. Again, fast forward into the pandemic, we went from wonder drug to wonder dog to wonder dud. All of a sudden, this amazing therapeutic used by billions of people became a false flag, a dud. Because when we look at how it was received during the pandemic, it was ostracized, it was ridiculed, it was marginalized. Doctors lost their license because they were merely trying to help people in a pandemic early when we didn't know much. See, among outpatients with mild to moderate COVID-19, treatment with ivermectin compared with placebo was said to not improve recovery time. And so thus, it was said to not support the use of ivermectin in patients with mild to moderate COVID-19. They said it was an unproven treatment for COVID-19. This is the bastion of scientific methodology being advocated here by the Associated Press. By the way, that was a Journal of American Medical Association in 2022 talking about how it didn't improve recovery time. But get this. Still on the Mayo Clinic website, ivermectin, the drug ivermectin used to treat prevent parasites in animals and in humans isn't a drug used to treat viruses. The FDA has an approved use of this drug to treat or prevent COVID-19 off-label. Taking large doses of this drug can cause serious harm. Don't use medications intended for animals or yourself to treat or prevent COVID-19. Now, here, the whole issue is a fear tactic. So the wonder drug became a wonder dud because it was allowing doctors to empower their patients basically to heal themselves before the vaccinations came to be. And even to this day on the Mayo Clinic website, they're saying here that this drug can't be used to treat viruses, though that's not true. Research has showed that. Check out the show notes. They say here the FDA has an approved use of this drug to treat or prevent COVID-19. That's true. It's not approved for that, but it is FDA approved. They talk about taking large doses of this drug can prove serious harm. Any drug can cause serious harm, even over the counters. But here, by creating the fear and turning this from a wonder drug to a wonder dud, what they did is they removed the connection between patients and doctors. So patients started seeking help on their own because doctors weren't there to provide it. The government was stepping in to keep them from achieving it. And so patients were getting access to ivermectin alone, and they were self-dosing. They said, don't use the medications intended for animals on yourself. This is FDA approved since 1987. So clearly the Mayo Clinic is advocating a false narrative about ivermectin because it is FDA approved. Now there's debate about its exact benefit in viruses, but clearly when given early, it can improve recovery, even though that 2022 article questioned that. So then we look at the next transition, because now that we're getting away from the pandemic and the much malignment of this drug, we can get actually back to the science and move away from this propagated narrative. Research has long suggested that this drug, ivermectin, sourced from ivermectin, actually could be repurposed. So it's research showing repurpose as an anti-cancer drug. Now, most of this research is preclinical. It's in vitro, so that's petri dish, that's cell. This is in vivo animal studies. There are no human studies on ivermectin as a repurposed antiparasitic medication. So to say that research on humans has not been done is correct. But to say there's no research is false, just like Mayo saying it's not FDA approved when it is. And understand that approximately 40 to 50% of all medications are used off-label. So if the FDA approves a drug for treatment of disease A, and it's been shown through experience and ongoing research to treat disease B, that is using a drug off-label. And the reason why that's so beneficial is that when you look at the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 studies in the FDA approval process, the phase 1 and phase 2 are looking at safety and toxicity profiles and benefit. So here, what you're able to now show is the massive safety and low toxicity profile. So we're talking billions of people that have been subjected to ivermectin, which is a safe drug. So thus the safety and acceptance of repurpose to reduce disease states and to treat a variety of ailments because it's proven to be safe. So let's go through just some of the quotes from different articles talking about ivermectin. Now, the first mention of ivermectin in reference to cancer that I could find was actually all the way back in 1986. Approved in 1987, first study mentioned in 1996. This article talked about the use of ivermectin to reverse multi-drug resistance in tumors. And here it is 2024. We're talking almost, 30 years ago. The second mention was in 1997. Again, looking at the multi-drug resistance mechanism of helping treatment to overcome the resistance that cancer can develop to chemotherapy primarily. And in 2004, a scientific publication was entitled Anti-Tumor Effects of Ivermectin. So going all the way back to the discovery in the 1970s of ivermectin, here it's actually being referenced in a scientific publication in 2004, European Journal of Pharmacology, as a repurposed medication as an anti-tumor. Again, the anti-tumor effects of ivermectins. So when we talk about ivermectin as a cancer wonder drug, I don't want to be hyperbolic here, okay? There's a lot of people that will make claims and become hyperbolic in their speech. We can just simply, I think, stick to the science. Here's a quote. We show that the treatment with the FDA-approved antiparasitic drug ivermectin induces immunogenic cell death and robust T-cell infiltration into breast tumors. It's a 2021 article, breast cancer. Well, I guess the late night show hosts and Dr. Fauci somehow missed that quote from 2021. How about this? Ivermectin also selectively targets immunosuppression populations, including myeloid cells and Tregs, resulting in enhanced T effector cell to Treg ratio. Now, you may go, well, I don't understand all those medical terms. Well, understand what happens in cancer and what happens in the tumor microenvironment, which is the environment around cancer, is that it will recruit cells to itself. And many of the cells it recruits there can be immune cells. And these can be what are called myeloid-derived suppressing cells or T-regulating cells. T-regulating cells are a type of T lymphocyte, but what happens is they come into that environment and they create an immunosuppressive environment. So by creating an immunosuppressive environment, other active immune cells that we want in that environment to see, identify, target the cancer becomes inhibited. It's a complex immune system, the cancer tumor microenvironment play. But what we know is that ivermectin can actually be used to restore sensitivity where resistance, because of multi-drug resistance, has developed. Combination therapy with ivermectin and immune checkpoint inhibitor therapies achieves synergy in limiting tumor growth and promoting complete responses. Now, when we look at treatment outcomes from a statistical standpoint and a study standpoint,
what we want to identify is overall survival. Essentially, what we want is complete responses, no evidence of disease, and we want that long lasting. Classically, overall, a 5-year survival of no evidence of disease is considered a cure. And so these are statistical values that we'll look at to really assess what is the benefit of these therapies. So they're here showing in this additional 2021 article that combining ivermectin with immune checkpoint inhibitors, these as Keytruda, Opdivo, and the like, they inhibit tumor growth and promote complete responses. Now, the mechanism here is really interesting because we have a good understanding of it. Ivermectin turns cold tumors hot. What we're talking about here is cold tumors or tumors that are immune blocking. They don't allow the immune system to infiltrate. They're not immunogenic. So the immune system can't activate against the tumor. But ivermectin can actually turn that cold tumor hot, and the heat is coming from the immune infiltration. And if you've ever had a PET CT scan and you see the PET, you see that light up like a Christmas tree. Now that's looking at the metabolic activity, but when you look at metabolic activity, it gives off heat as a byproduct. You know this from thyroid. When you have low thyroid, you have low basal body temperature. But when you give that person thyroid, their basal body temperature goes up. Why? Well, you're stimulating mitochondria, you're stimulating energy production by that thyroid, and that in turn is off-putting heat. And so we're actually seeing that in those imaging from the metabolic activity. And as I mentioned, all the research is in vivo and in vitro. It's all preclinical, no human studies. Now, Kathleen Rudy and Dr. Paul Merrick, they're all working on that as we speak. But we have to understand where the limitations of the data really is. We don't have human studies. That's not a negative. That's just the reality of the situation. Remember, we have huge safety studies that show that ivermectin in billions of people is safe. So early on in the pandemic, where they advocated that people needed to avoid ivermectin because of its unknown safety profile, well, there's really only two things you could say there. You can say that either one, they were very ill-informed, ignorant. Now, ignorance, whether that be via omission or commission, is not acceptable. But the people that were advocating for the elimination of ivermectin because of unknown safety profile were supposed to be in positions of the know, and they were not. So I find it hard to believe that, they just didn't know. So then the other alternative is worse. They were intentionally not telling the truth. So neither of which is very good. So when we look at the cancer types as it relates to ivermectin, we have to understand that it's not just one cancer type. There's actually research showing different cancer types that ivermectin can be used against. Now, again, limitations here, just like with the limitations overall studies, not all cancer types have been shown to be treated or benefited in treatment with the addition of ivermectin. Again, preclinical studies. Colon cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, melanoma, leukemia, all have been shown in preclinical research to benefit from the addition of ivermectin. And I would actually add those tumor types where you're trying to elicit an immune response will benefit from ivermectin as well. Or if resistance has developed because of multi-drug resistance, these are pumps that develop within the cancer cells that will then pump out the chemotherapeutic drug after it enters the cell. They will benefit as well. My opinion, based on the science, is that ivermectin actually will benefit many, if not all, cancer types, but it's definitely going to benefit some more than others. So let's go through step by step some of the specific anti-cancer mechanisms. People say, well, don't make a claim. Well, what's a claim? A claim is just simply a proclamation of something that you know. Well, here's the research that is making the claim, and so we're just going to repeat what the research shows. Number one, it inhibits proliferation. That's not a cardinal, but it's a hallmark symptom
of not a hallmark symptom. It is a hallmark of cancer. So when you look at Hanahan and his different publications, 2002, 2012, and 2022, describing the hallmarks of cancer, proliferation is one of those original 6 published in 2002. Ivermectin inhibits cancer cell proliferation by affecting key signaling pathways such as the WNT beta-catenin and this just rolls right off your tongue, P13K AKT mTOR pathway. By the way, that last pathway there, a very pro-growth pathway that athletes make use of when they train, break muscle down, build it back up stronger. That P13K AKT mTOR pathway is present in over 44% of all cancer types. And when you look at cancer, what happens is these pro-growth pathways, WNT beta-catenin and the P13K AKT mTOR, they become dysregulated, they proliferate, and there's no counter regulation associated with them. But we know that ivermectin can actually suppress the growth of colorectal cancer cells by targeting these specific pathways. Specifically, ivermectin plus gemcitabine, Gemsar, very common treatment in colorectal cancer, but also in pancreatic cancer. The combination there inhibited cell proliferation via G1 cell cycle arrest by downregulating cyclin D1 expression. Now, G1 is one of the phases in mitosis. So here, this study is highlighting how the combination of ivermectin plus a chemotherapy, Gemzar, is actually inhibiting how the cancer cell will go through the process of mitosis and replicate. Just a research there, and show that in melanoma, colorectal, pancreatic, and even glioblastoma. So that's proliferation. What about chemosensitization? A lot of times what will happen is when you introduce chemotherapy in the treatment of cancer, that the cancer will develop resistance. And it does it via a variety of ways. I already mentioned the multi-drug resistant pump that will pump it out. But here you can actually give ivermectin to restore the chemosensitivity of the cancer cell. So it's been shown to sensitize ovarian cancer cells to cisplatin by suppressing the AKT mTOR signaling pathway. So ivermectin has been shown to improve sensitivity of cancer to the following chemotherapy: gemcitabine, cisplatin, and doxorubicin. The third is it induces apoptosis. Apoptosis is programmed cell death. There's many different types of programmed cell death, but one of the things that we can do is through these treatments, even some of the more innovative treatments that we're doing here at the Williams Cancer, it's a pulse electric field therapy. It actually destroys the internal components of the cell, and that triggers apoptosis. Ivermectin and gemcitabine increase cell apoptosis by inducing mitochondrial dysfunction via the overproduction of reactive oxygen species and decreasing the mitochondrial membrane potential. It was an in vivo experiment showing that the combination actually damaged the membrane polarization of the mitochondria, the energy powerhouses of the cell, compromising energy production, compromising tumor growth. It's research. It modulates the tumor microenvironment. No longer can we look at tumors as a solid ball of cells isolated from the rest of the body. It actually interacts with the body in this kind of gray zone, what's called the tumor microenvironment. And research suggests that it alters the tumor microenvironment by altering the blood vessels, the immune cells, and other cells that support that matrix. They modulate the immune system, reducing tumor supportive activities in the tumor microenvironment. See, the immune system actually is used against the immune system in the tumor microenvironment. I talked about the myeloid-derived suppressor cells, the T-regulating cells, but here it's almost like an autoimmune type of disease where the immune system attracted to the tumor microenvironment, these could be macrophages, neutrophils as well, they get turned on the rest of the immune system. They actually create a buffer. See, cancer doesn't create anything new. What cancer simply does is misuse and adulterate what's already there. Ivermectin selectively targets immunosuppressive population cell types, the myeloid cells and the T-regulating cells, resulting in enhanced T effector T-regulating cell ratio, meaning you're reducing the immunosuppressive and increasing the T cytotoxic T cells that actually can destroy cancer limiting its growth and triggering apoptosis. It's anti-angiogenic. Angiogenesis is the blood vessel growth that cancer so desperately needs to supply it with nutrients and to eliminate waste, also to spread. But ivermectin inhibits capillary network formation, thus inhibiting endothelial cell and angiogenesis growth. In cancer models, have been shown to target glioblastomas through this mechanism of action. It inhibits DNA repair mechanisms. One of the things that we'll try to do in cancer treatment is actually damage DNA, and thus triggering it to die, program cell death. But if the cancer cell can repair itself, that allows it to continue on, though maybe not in optimal shape. Here, it inhibits DNA repair mechanism, that is ivermectin, and thus increasing the susceptibility of these cancer cells to DNA damage, ultimately leading to their death. So it's going to augment chemotherapy, and it's going to augment things like radiation as well. And I would say it's going to augment even the next-gen integrative therapies, such as pulse electric field, targeted osmotic lytic therapy, and many others coming, because it is further preparing the cell for damage, that is the cancer cell, and ultimately leading it to its death. It inhibits cancer stem cells. Ivermectin is an inhibitor of cancer stem cells, which represents a reservoir of disease. So these stem cells are the backups that we want no part of. We have backups of our phones, we have backups of our computers, and we always need those to be able to reboot in case damage was done. That same thing applies to cancer. If damage is done, whether intentional or not, there can be a backup, a reboot. And that's really what cancer stem cells are. So here, a breast cancer cell line study, the experimental results showed that ivermectin would preferentially target and inhibit cancer stem cell rich populations compared to other populations. Beyond that, it's been shown that is ivermectin to inhibit cancer metastasis. It's an immunomodulator. It stimulates autophagy. It promotes apoptosis, as I mentioned, but beyond that, it promotes pyroptosis, which is a different type of programmed cell death. It induces oxidative stress, which further damages those cell types and leads ultimately to their death. It creates that energy crisis, and it modulates the genetic expression, what's called epigenetics. So when we look at the research, this wonder drug that is termed a wonder dog to wonder dud, research is really suggesting that it should be repurposed as an anti-cancer therapy alone, but more, I believe, in conjunction with other therapies. There's no one answer to cancer. There's no one answer to cause of cancer. And likewise, there's no one answer to the treatment of cancer. But here, ivermectin is going to be improving immunotherapy, immune checkpoint inhibiting therapy. Research I previously quoted. It's going to improve chemotherapy, gemcitabine, cisplatin, doxorubicin. If you have a cold tumor, such as pancreatic cancer, it's going to help to take that shot and make it more responsive to immunotherapy. So clearly, ivermectin can be used to augment conventional cancer care. Why aren't more using it? Probably because of the fear, the propagated narrative that really has paralyzed doctors. But we doctors are advocates for our patients and our patients alone. We should not let others create fear within us in taking to the defense and the benefit of our patients. Now, the really exciting thing about ivermectin is that even beyond its potential use as repurposed for the research as a treatment of cancer, there's also suggestions that it actually could be used as a treatment for something called aging. Just as there are the hallmarks of cancer, there is also something called the hallmarks of aging. And there's crossover between those, and we'll talk a lot about that. So you'll get to hear about the crossover and the interconnectivity there. And by the way, we tap into that at the Williams Cancer Institute. But two mechanisms of the anti-aging effects of ivermectin is one, cellular senescence and chronic inflammation. Well, clearly when we talk about cancer, inflammation is the bed in which it lies, but likewise in aging, chronic inflammation is something that we see a critical component in that process. So, for example, we know that interleukin-1, interleukin-6, and transforming growth factor beta, these are three inflammatory cytokine signals that are increased with aging. They are inflammatory markers that progress aging. So that's when you counter them, you reduce that inflammation, which accelerates aging. Cellular senescence, these are cells that get turned off from replicating. It's a protective mechanism. Though that may seem protective, they can in turn be destructive by stimulating inflammation. So by targeting these senescent cells that have now turned off the ability to replicate, you can target them with senolytics and destroy them so that they don't contribute to or promote further inflammation. So here, ivermectin in research is being clearly pointed to as a repurposed medication against cancer, but also in aging. Thus, in aging, you're going to be potentially treating almost every disease you can think of. What about adverse events? I mentioned that billions have taken ivermectin. Again, phase 1, phase 2 studies on a wide multitude of parasitic infections shown to be safe. Rare adverse event side effects are very, very rare. So angioedema, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, seizures, visual impairment. Of all of these, I've only seen visual impairment in one patient in the treatment of cancer. Now, wasn't able to prove that it was ivermectin that was causing this patient's visual impairment, but we had the patient on ivermectin, we had the patient on other IV therapies. This was before I came to the Williams Cancer Institute, and the patient had visual changes, and so we basically took all those therapies away. Not a proof of cause and effect as it relates to ivermectin, but it was one of the many therapies that the patient was receiving at that time. But other literature has suggested that ivermectin can contribute to visual impairment. Now, what we know about the ivermectin dose and CNS side effects is that it has to be at really, really high doses. And this is going to be well beyond the typical 0.3 to 0.5 milligrams per kilogram dosing that research suggests you should use as a repurposed cancer aid. And there we're talking about the gram dosages. And there are doctors out there that use that dose, and I wouldn't recommend that even for those doctors, because it will create some central nervous system side effects. And some of that can be detrimental to the patient. So what we have here is a medication that has clear, solid evidence, clear, solid history, clear verbiage that it was a wonder drug. And yet there are so many doctors that are scared of it and so many patients that want access to it. And so what we end up having is patients that want access to it, doctors that are afraid to prescribe it, but don't also know how to prescribe it. And in between is the vast volume of research that suggests that these should be bridged, that doctors should embrace the research and should further advance science and actually bring human trials to publication to show what's the best way to fit these drugs together here, ivermectin, how it can best utilize, whether that be as an integrative strategy or a conventional strategy, to help bring these patients to the healing journey that they so desperately need. So I wanted to start off with ivermectin with this new Off-ScriptRX podcast because it's such a hot topic. Everybody knows it. But most of that's because of the pandemic. But understand that the research there goes back to the 70s, 1987 approved. First research suggesting its use as an anti-cancer in 1996. This is not new. This is not new. Just what we have is a recent memory bias from the pandemic that has everybody scared. But I hope what this does, this podcast does, this particular podcast and future podcasts to come, it empowers you as a patient to be the owner of your healthcare, to be your own best advocate, and to be a resource to empower other doctors. If you're a doctor, I encourage you to remember your first love. It's your patient. And follow the science. And yes, every therapy has limitations in the research, and we must recognize that, conventional or integrative, and use our best ability from benefits and risks to guide patients in treatment. So I encourage you to join the repurposed medication movement. Join it per the research, not per what I say, but because the research supports it. Go over to Off-ScriptRX.com and follow us. Follow the new discoveries, the new exciting, journeys that we're going to go through, what the future will bring for repurposed medications. I encourage you to follow us on social media, share, like, and subscribe, and get other people involved so that they can jump on board with the powerful, tangible benefit that repurposed medications can provide in cancer, aging, and beyond. And what we want you to do by going to the website, off-scriptrx.com, as well as this podcast, is to engage with the research, engage with the content that we provide there, discover for yourself, and then empower yourself, and hopefully empower others to join this great movement. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to joining with you again in a future podcast. So more coming at you very, very soon.
Your health deserves more than a one-size-fits-all approach. Subscribe now and share this episode to help others break away from outdated treatments. Visit offscriptrx.com to see how repurposed medications can fit into your personal cancer care strategy. Don't settle. Take action and join the movement to rewrite the future of medicine. Rethink repurposing medications. Rethink reality.